Let me introduce myself. I'm Richie Beretta. Nice to meet you. What's your name? I see, because everybody would have to talk at once, and that's the joke. So when I usually give a seminar on mixing or production, I've done this a couple of times here. This is like I think my fourth one. Has anybody seen the other ones? Okay, one person. All right, so maybe I should do the intro because most of you are like, who the hell are you? I am a record producer and a recording engineer and a mixing engineer. And over the course of my career, I've worked with a lot of big artists, a lot of small artists. And I found that no matter who you are, there's always this sort of want for more confidence, either as an artist or as a producer or as an engineer, or you want to be validated in some way to know that the time that you're putting in to learn your craft is paying off, or it will pay off in the future because you're learning the right things. And there's an uncertainty that YouTube University sort of monopolizes on, They know how bad you just want to make your records. You may not even want to be famous. You may not even want to be, not that that's the pentultimate of success. I personally think it's nonsense. But they feed off your need to be better, a better version of you. And then they give you information because they know you're hungry for it. And they don't even really make records, They can't make records because the amount of time that you need to be an influencer in 2024, you can't. That's a full-time job. So how are you making records? So ever since 2012, I kind of made it my own personal business to help as many people as I possibly can because I got really, really lucky in my career. I started off in bands, just probably like most of y'all. I would imagine that's how one gets started. You hear a record and you're like, oh shit, I feel really good. I want to make people feel this good. And you go and you pick up a guitar or you pick up something, you learn how to use it, and then you're like, you go down the rabbit hole, and the next thing you know, you got a studio with 10, 11, 76s. If y'all know what that thing is, if you don't get that joke, it's okay. So I got pretty lucky in the beginning. When I came from a band, I stopped playing bands. I realized I wanted to just make records for people, help people make records. Started living in the studio, and got lucky with a couple of inquiries for some pretty big artists. And I was in a position to teach, and that's what I wanted to do because it took me a long time to figure out, what was working and what wasn't working. I made a lot of crappy records, like in the beginning, that I thought were really good, and then I didn't realize that the only reason why I thought they were good was because I was having fun making them, and that's not a good barometer of like what good is. It's just you're passionate about what you do. So when you're doing it's like someone who likes to cook, right? You could make a dish that doesn't really taste so good, but you could have fun making it. Those two are not mutually exclusive. So I had nobody to tell me, no, this isn't good. You got to do X, Y, Z. And I wasted a lot of time. So when I finally felt I had things that were working for me, I wanted to share them. So I started teaching along with doing my production. And then it turned into this. And I'm also a big nerd. And one day I was at MAGFest, I think, in 2018. And it was 2:30 in the morning or something. And I walked past a panel, and the panel was how a compressor works. Does anybody know what that is? Okay, when I say compressor, oh man! So you guys, okay? I'm gonna get to my first official question for y'all, but before I do, finish up the intro. And I was like, man, that's right, music and gaming. Like people here make music, and they probably would benefit from some tried and true information. And also, I'm a nerd, so this is gonna work just fine. And And that's now we're here. So let's officially begin. So by a show of hands, how many of y'all would you consider, who's an artist? Like, what I mean by that is you are making your own music and you're also producing it and mixing it and mastering it and doing all the other. So 1, 2, is it most of you guys? Okay, who's producing but producing for other people? Okay, and anybody just mixing records? Nobody. That's usually nobody just mixing records. So a lot of people didn't raise their hand. What the hell are you guys doing here? You just want to hang out with me? That's cool, man. We can just chill. What's that? Oh, okay. You just want to know about music. Who or did you come here? So we're gonna go through a Beyonce record today. So this is like brand new. I don't even think it came out yet. So I mean, we may be getting in trouble for this. I don't really care. Whatever, dude. What's that? I tried to get her to come, but she doesn't play video games, so she was just like, "What? Who are you? Lose my phone number." I think that was the exact thing she said. Yeah, no one gets to talk to Beyonce. You just get a job from her, and then that's it. So today we're gonna go through a Beyonce record, and the way that this goes is the last 2 years is I got a D20 here. It's not a big one, but I got a D20 here. Feel free to interrupt me whenever, and you can either ask a question. Now, if I feel that question is not sort of relevant because I don't want to try and run off the rails. But maybe, you see something that I've done that I'm talking about and you get like, oh, I want to ask something and it's completely random. You can ask, but you have to roll for it. You can also tweak the production if you want to, I don't know, mute the kick drum or do something. You can ask, but you got to roll for it. If you want me to erase the song, you got to roll for it. But it's going to be, 10 perfect 20s in a row. So, but you could try. Last year, someone was like, I want to distort the whole thing. And I was like, okay, roll for it. And I actually, had to be a perfect 20. And he did twice. And I was like, all right, I guess I got to distort the whole fucking song. And it sounded kind of cool. All right, so I'm going to open up this record. So usually I'll do like independent records. It's more so in like the alternative side. The first year was a punk record, and then after that, I think was like an industrial record. I don't remember what the other one was, but then last year we did, the Dwelling of the Duels here. Now there's a thing called Dwelling of the Duels where you cover a video game song, and then it's at MAG they hold a listening party, and you vote for it, and somebody wins a prize. So friends of mine from New York, they came down here. We did a cover of DuckTales Moon Theme, and we came in second place. I was kind of salty about that, so I went through that record. But somebody at the last panel was like, yo, what Beyonce songs did you work on? Can we see a Beyonce song? And I don't really carry them with me, but I was like, right before MAG, I got a job working on a remix for her, and I thought, let's look at it. So what we're going to do, I want to acquaint you with the record, and that way you know what you're listening to. So we'll listen to the song. Always, it's a house record, so is anybody here into house records, house music, dance music? What type of music do you guys make? So the ones who are the artists, you raise your hand. What type of music do you make? What's grunge and synthwave? Oh, hell yeah. And someone, you raise your hand too, right? What type of music do you guys make? Oh, okay. Oh, you know what? I should have brought a fucking punk record. Do I have one? I may actually have one. Now we'll keep it Beyonce. We're not gonna kick Beyonce out. Hold on. Okay. More questions for y'all. I'm probably going to ask you more questions than you're going to ask me, but who's familiar with Pro Tools? Not have you used it, but do you know what it is? You guys, what's the DAW that most of you use? And you can all shout at once. There's only 3 of them, so Yeah, I figured. Yeah, Ableton. Was it what? Reason? Logic? Reaper. Yeah, that's Cakewalk. Who said Cakewalk? What time machine did you walk in on, sir? Oh, that joke landed. Was it? Ardor? Lord of the Rings? There's another one. I'm funny, right? It's all right. It's okay. You can say yes. Or no. All right. So Ableton. So I produce in Ableton. This production was made in Ableton, with the exception of the vocals that came from the label. Usually when I'm doing and if I'm doing anything that has to do with sequencing, I'm using Ableton, only because I really like the way it works with MIDI. I'm not a big fan of it in terms of like it running smoothly all the time, but I'm a special case because I mix in Pro Tools and I also record in Pro Tools. So if I'm working on a metal record or if I'm working on a punk record, and it's something that's band centric, I'm going to be using Pro Tools because Pro Tools, their audio engine and their software infrastructure is just has a really high integrity. There's no delay compensation in terms of, I mean, there's always going to be delay compensation, but it feels more like the old days. So I'm not that old, but I started really young and I was recording on tape with my band when I was a kid, and that there's a reactionary feeling that you get when you record onto a medium that has very, very, very low latency. Now, even analog has latency because it takes time for sound to reach your ears, and it's latency, right? Which is the reason why most people record when they have the cans on. So, Ableton is, it gets interesting. Logic is great. I just haven't really decided. I just haven't really wanted to learn it. That's really it. I'm just lazy. I used to. Sometimes I had to mix records in it, but in terms of like building a record from scratch in it, I wouldn't know really where to begin. What else have I used? I don't know. I used everything, but predominantly Ableton and Pro Tools. Anybody use Cubase? Yeah, that's a good one. That's whenever I'm cursing out Ableton, that's what I'm like, all right, this is going to be the fucking year that I use Cubase because, and it never happens because then I have to learn another thing and whatever. So, does anybody have any questions to kick before I play this thing? Actually, let me just make sure it works. I got to turn the faders up. Hold up. I did it. Okay. All right. Let's listen to this thing. Here we go. rest is a lead out. So usually the lead out's just like drone on so that a DJ can. Anybody here DJ? Oh, so you know what that is. Okay. All right. Let's look through the session. So when you're making a what's up? Is not? Man. What is that? Mirror display? Chungus ain't there anymore. Garfungus, dude. You were close. Is he there now? Oh, I know what's going on. Silly goose things, you know? Arrange? Okay. There you go. Okay, here's Pro Tools. There's Garchungus. Garfungus. He's big. Big Garfungus. All right, so whenever I do a record, I'm going to try and talk about... Actually, here's some more questions, because I want to make this as beneficial to you as possible. Do you want me to talk more about the production side? More about the ideation? Or do you want me to talk about more of the mixing side? How I balance the production and what I made? What would be most beneficial to you guys? Mixing? Mixing? It seems like, because that's what usually is the missing link. You guys, you can come up with a record, but then what do you do with it after to make it competitive? So, does anybody want to tell me what they think mixing is? No. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. Adjusting levels. Yeah. Yeah, emphasizing or minimizing parts of the arrangement. Yeah. Making it good. Yeah. That's true, man. Like, sometimes the only thing I think about is how do I make it hot? Like, anybody else want to come up with some answers? They're all part of it. Basically, whatever you're talking about, all three definitions have to do with balance, right? It's a balance that a record requires. So that's sort of that's the trick. When you're producing a record, when you're making it, right? I'm going to call producing composition. That's sort of, it's become synonymous these days with that. So when you're producing a record, there's something in your head that you're trying to get out. You hear it, it's hot in your head, and you're like, once this is out, it's going to be good. And then as it starts coming out little by little, you're like, this isn't what I'm hearing in my head. And you start chasing stuff that doesn't exist, right? I get records like that. And I could tell that the producer heard something, but possibly didn't get it. Now, the crazy thing is that when you hear something and you're not getting it, it may just be such a small thing that feels like it's this vast like gap between you and your vision. It could be just an EQ. It could be like a spikiness to a kick. I mean, some people here doing punk and metal. So like if your kick drum doesn't sound a certain way because your audience expects the kick drum, especially if you're doing metal, modern metal these days, to sound like a basketball. If it don't sound like a basketball, your audience, you're afraid your audience won't relate because you relate to that sound, right? But the really important question that you should be asking yourself is not what the audience is expecting. That's important, but it's not the most important questions. What you expect to hear back from the speakers. Do you even are you trying to copy a sound that you heard? Or is because you heard that sound, something happens in your head that's completely unique to what's out in the universe, and you're trying to get that out. And when you try and mimic something that isn't supposed to be mimicked because it's your own interpretation of it, do you lose sight of the project? That's like honestly, I hate to talk like one of those like yappers on YouTube where they're like, this is the one big problem. Producers hate this one trick. It's like, but it really is. if you lose sight on your vision, sometimes you don't even know what that actually is because it's not correlating. So I could talk about that in my mix breakdown, because that original intention has to do, like, it's the difference between what makes a song good and what makes a song bad, in my opinion. I mean, I know those two words are subjective, but oh shit, dude, it's Big Will. Look at this motherfucker. Here we go. The artist's vision, your vision, even my vision as a mixer, right? We all have some type of sonic requirement that we want to, like, extract from the song based on how we feel about it. If that's overlooked, the audience usually finds it boring because you're not really telling them anything. The reason why people love to listen to music is because it's a form of communication. It can transcend sound. There's nothing on this planet like it. If you listen to something, you feel something. Happy, sad, right? Now, for the general audience, it's an amalgamation of your sounds. It's the lyrics, it's the music, it's the chord changes, right? Sometimes if it's chord modulations. It could be anything that will extract an emotional response, and it's complex. But for the producer and the artist, that could be simple. Like, I don't producers here, right? You ever listen to a snare sound, just one snare, and you're like, oh, this shit's hot. And it's just and you're like, yeah, fuck yeah, that's hot. Go do that to, like, a regular person. And they're going to be like, what the fuck? What are you doing? You know, that's what makes us different. And we got to use that. That's a special power. We got to use that, right? If a snare, I'm serious about this. Like, so I grew up in Queens, and the area that I lived in was a pretty eclectic area, right? Predominantly, the neighboring neighborhood was Caribbean. So I grew up with a lot of reggae, like, I just listening to it, dance hall, and their drums, to me, are just the sound the best. They're heavy and slap. It's just, I can give a whole talk on that, but I'm not going to get into it. But when I hear that type of rhythm, I just lose my mind. I become happy. Sometimes I'm in the gym and, like, I'm not having a good day. I'll put on some dance hall, and all of a sudden, it's like nothing happened. Just it's a drug, right? There's nothing on this planet that can do that, you know, that isn't tangible. And all it is an amalgamation of sounds. So we have the opportunity to be affected by the song before anybody else. That should be very freeing for you. That should be the thing where it's like, okay, you know what? I can't make a mistake here because I'm the one who's going to get affected first. And as long as you're honest, like, with yourself. Remember in the beginning where I was like, sometimes I used to get charged up because I'm making the record, not because the record's making me happy. I'm just happy to work. You want the record to make you happy. So the way I like to start my songs, whether it be production or mixing, but especially mixing, I mix the way I like to listen. So take that as, like, a little bit of an advice. If you who here listens to music every day? I mean, and now everybody should raise their hands, right? So you have an experience of being affected by sound. If you're listening every day, how many things do we do repeatedly every day, for real? Like, you know, with the side of, like, maybe brushing our teeth and, I don't know, eating, you know, and your boy is good at eating, but that's also another panel. So the more you tap into that expertise, that's a knife that you're sharpening. So I mix the way I like to listen. When I listen to a record, no matter what genre it is, it's going to be drums, because I just like rhythm. And then after that is bass, because I love the pair. Some mixers, they start with vocals. I mean, they'll tell you, like, oh, well, of course you got to start with vocals because it's not the most important thing in the record to you. But you're not allowed to tell your audience what's the most important thing. All you can do is sort of lead them. I mean, this is what I think is the most important as the artist. But ultimately, the best songs make the audience project whatever they want onto the record. Every song means something differently to somebody else, despite what the artist has intended. So mix the way you want to listen. The one thing that binds us as human beings, and I apologize for getting so philosophical, but it is a pretty philosophical thing. we are affected. Our like the response that we give emotionally is finite. We have a finite amount of emotions that we can display based on an infinite amount of stimulus, right? That's what binds us. So I could say one thing and make somebody sad, but somebody else could, feel happy because they interpret it. So no matter what your intention is, the audience is going to interpret. So it's up to you to have that music affect you like the audience is going to be affected. And that's how you guarantee that the audience feels something. Because if you're feeling something honestly, chances are, because we're all human beings, we're all pretty much the same, they're going to feel something. I'll give you an example before I start going through this session. So when I used to teach this in class, I used to ask, what does the color red mean to you? In one word. What's the color red mean to you in one word? Just knee jerk. What? Blood. Okay. So that's pretty, I would imagine that if I interviewed 1,000 people, I would get that response, right? How many, it's pretty, it doesn't seem so outlandish that the color red could be synonymous with blood. Nobody would be like, what? But if I said, what the color red means, well, one day I was walking with my dad and I was eating an ice cream and I got distracted by like a red balloon that was floating in the air and I dropped my ice cream. My dad yelled at me and I was sad. So I guess it means sad, How many people are going to have that exact same story when I say, what does the color red mean? You understand what I'm saying? I'm convoluting it. This is what we do as producers when we get in our heads. We just start convoluting the main idea, and it doesn't translate. And then we think, this song sucked. Well, maybe it doesn't suck. Maybe it's just too wound up, and that's when you backtrack. So anyway, use your simplified emotional response as an advantage when you're mixing, and then let the technical side of your brain take over. So we'll start with the kick drum. Here's this kick. This is what it sounds like soloed. Let me just make sure the bus is on. Yeah. Okay. All right. So this, let me show you what I did for the chain. This is an EQ. Forgive me if I'm going super simple here. Does everybody know what an EQ is? Who doesn't know what an EQ is? Okay, an EQ is something that just changes the gain of different frequencies in a sound. So if, like this kick drum, for example, maybe I should have used the mic stand. Let me just bypass everything here for you. Okay, here's a kick. Now, if I bypass this EQ, you may not be able to hear it because it sounds like, because I'm getting so much echo from the back wall. But did you hear that it was a little bit more spiky when I bypassed it? Just didn't want that sound. And also, what would you say? Oh, because of the reverberation. So when I was working in Ableton and I programmed the kick drum, because Ableton's audio engine is a little funky, it's actually darker sounding. I wasn't getting any of that high end. And when I brought it into Pro Tools, which is another reason, if you're not mixing in 2 DAWs, I do recommend it, just because it takes you out of the, this one world thing. It was like you're looking at Ableton, and then you got to mix, and you're sort of still in Ableton, or you're still in Cubase or whatever. Actually, Cubase is you can do both in, but like I would recommend if you're not using another DAW to mix and you're producing in Ableton, get it free with Reaper's awesome, dude. Like my mastering engineer uses Reaper. He got rid of Pro Tools a while ago, and he crushes it. It breaks you free of same place. But when I heard it, I was like, I needed to subdue some high end. And Fab Filter has a dynamic EQ that's really responsive and nice, and it just smooths it out. So it's once it reaches past a certain point where I feel like it's too loud, it clamps back down. So that's the first plugin. And because, because the room is a little bit live, I'm not going to do a ton of audio examples. So if you want to hear something, just shout out, okay? And I'll play it. The next one is another EQ, and this is my technique of EQing. I'll use Fab Filter because it's relatively transparent to do my reductive work. All right, it's not imparting any sonic footprint. Then I'll reach for another EQ if I want to amplify some frequency content. that does impart a sonic footprint based on what I like that thing to do. So this is a anybody use Plugin Alliance stuff? They're pretty good and they're pretty affordable. It's a really, really great company, and I would say for the last 5 years I've migrated from using a lot of UAD stuff. Does anyone know what the UAD plugins are? No? Okay. Well, I moved from one company to the other because this one's a really good one. So this one you should hear a difference. If you don't, then I'm really going to not keep going through this stuff. Here we go. You hear a little bit. There's a little bit more low end there. So I like the way the sub amplifies with this plugin because it's smoother and puffier. It maintains the transient. You guys know what transient means? Transient is just the beginning of the sound. So if I were to go like that, the impact, that's a transient. It's usually the loudest part, and then there's a sustain, which is all the dissipating frequencies that come after, or what any sounds that my hand caused, the dissipation of the vibration of the wood, that's your sustain. So the transient is your impact. People who are doing like punk and metal, you guys probably are well familiar with how important transient information is because it's driving music. Guitars have transients. The bass definitely has transients. The drums have transients, but it's a very, very tight-sounding genre. Now, dance music kicks are long. They're tuned. They have a note, right? It would be the equivalent of miking a kick drum, and the kick drum was really long, and it had a really long excursion of air coming through the kick drum, giving you that note, right? So I have to control that. I don't really like the way Fab Filter in this particular case would do it because it's just too sterile. I wanted to add some harmonic behavior to it, and that's what this plugin is doing. So there's my second EQ. Now, after I EQ drums, I compress them. I like to EQ into compressors. How many of y'all are familiar with compressors? I think I asked this before in the beginning of the thing. Yeah? Okay. Any questions on compressor because I'm going to kind of dive into it here because I'm going to give you like a little trick on drums. So before I start talking about compression, do you have any questions on anything that they do specifically? This one? No, it's flat, but okay, let's talk about this. For drums, for anything, and this is any genre, especially band-centric music. I'm really, because my background is in playing music, I didn't start with engineering, I started with playing music, so I use that knowledge to my advantage. If this song, I think this song is in E. No, it's in G. So this song's in G, and the bass doesn't go down past the lowest G. And the kick drum sample, you can see through the analyzer, also doesn't go down past the lowest G because I tuned it. So why do I need this information here? If it's not adding a harmonic. Sometimes when our brains hear sub-information, what we do is it's a psychoacoustic effect where we create in our head what we think that frequency content sounds like, and we envision it an octave above in a frequency range that we can comprehend. That's why people are so infatuated with bass. Like when bass music just keeps getting louder and louder and louder, is because everybody we don't hear that stuff in the real world. We're not sensitive to it. So when there's a lot of it, our brain starts going nuts and starts making up a story that we are fabricating. It's a pretty amazing phenomenon, right? So, which is the reason why bass is such a hot commodity in music since the beginning, since Motown. If there was no Motown, the Beatles wouldn't sound like the Beatles because they were chasing Motown bass. Paul's bass had to be the biggest fucking bass on the block, and he would listen to Motown and be like, why can't I get it like this? Why can't I get it like this? And the Motown people were just cranking their amps up. That wasn't even from the mix. But when you heard it, it blew your mind because we don't hear that stuff on a day-to-day basis. We're not sensitive to it. The same thing goes for beautiful top end. We don't hear that stuff. Once you pass 3,300 cycles, and it's hertz for people who, you know what I'm talking about? You guys, okay? Good. I want to make sure that I'm not getting too complex. But once you pass 3,300 cycles, our sensitivity goes down again. And that same phenomenon starts happening. That's why, like, when you first start out, I don't know if you guys may have noticed this, but when you first start out, and when young engineers start out, what are the two things that they pay attention to the most? Top end and big fucking bass. And all the things in the middle that we are really sensitive to, that need to be there, get overlooked because we want to give the hot shit. We want that big bass, and then most people, just use that for whatever genre. You ever hear a metal record with a lot of bass? How terrible it sounds, especially when the kick drum starts doing like crazy double kick drum, and all of a sudden there's so much sub. The reason why it sounds so terrible, because if you were to measure a bass wave, it goes about 30 feet. It takes 30 feet for a subsonic wave to dissipate. To just say, I don't have enough energy that when I hit a wall, I don't have enough energy to be reflected back to your ear. It'll be reflected back because of physics, but it won't make it that far and you won't hear it, right? If you have that subsonic wave repeated, I think I got about an hour left. 40 minutes left. I go to 12:30. Yeah? Okay. She was like, shut the fuck up, dude. And I was like, wait, no, not yet. So that if you actually try to have that frequency repeat, you would become ill from listening to it, right? Now, speakers aren't even really designed. I mean, it takes a really expensive, really well-designed speaker to reproduce low end like that. It just doesn't happen. But because we know how it makes us feel as producers, because we're overly sensitive to that stuff, we try and add it without knowing the science about it. So I cut my bass. That was a very convoluted answer to why the hell am I cutting the bass end. Yeah, go for it. Yeah, there is. It's annoying, but everybody has to do it at least, once. You just got to listen to music, that you. I'm gonna answer that question with another question. So the people who are producing here, do you listen to music on the same speakers that you work on? Car test, okay. Headphones. What about the monitors that you work on? Do you listen to music on those? Do you sit in front of them and just vibe out to those speakers? No. Yes. Okay, that's good. And that's how you do it. You just got to listen to music on your monitors. Like, I could mix a record in here. I would have to listen for hours with a lot of breaks to do it. Just then, okay, this is what this room sounds like. And you listen to it with something familiar that you know, and then you try to make your best guesstimate. It's not going to be perfect, but it can be done, I had to do that 3 or 4 weeks ago, maybe more than that. One of my speakers wasn't the speaker. It was a DSP. It was a computer that connects to the speakers that takes. It basically corrects weird acoustic situations. It died, so I had no left speaker. So I had to mix the rest of the record in mono, and then everything was cool. But then when I started getting to the reverb cancels when it's in mono. So I had to do my best to remember what reverb sounded like in mono in order to make that record work. It worked because I do listening exercises every day before I start. What is going on with this thing? Hold on, I got to quit again. Save and quit. No. It's all good. Just fucking quit. Garfungus, and then we open it again. My iLock. I think I have because it's dongle here. Anyway, so yeah, you can just listen to it, but it's not going to be. Well, it depends, man. It depends. Nothing's impossible. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Analog reverb in mono can work. So what I mean by that is like a plate. An analog reverb is something that creates reverb that's either captured with one microphone, like a mono room mic. That's not going to collapse in mono because it was recorded in mono, right? A spring is analog, so it can be one spring with one wire coming out of the spring, plate. Any kind of analog situation that utilizes one input will be fine. But I'm talking about digital reverb or synthetic reverb or even algorithmic reverb. Any kind of synthetic reverb that isn't captured with one microphone, it's meant the way it works is there's a signal. That signal has some kind of synthetic reverb imparted on it, and then to make it sound wide on one channel, certain frequencies are distributed through left and right, or some things are pitched a certain way and modulated on one speaker, and then when you collapse into mono, when you sum, there's going to be phase incoherencies which cause a null. So, but that's a sound too. You know, so you know what you do next time you have a listening exercise, collapse into mono from your monitor control, and then see what it sounds like. And you're only going to hear the stereo information. You're going to, I'm sorry, that's if you do a difference. You're only going to hear the center information. So your kick, your snare, your vocal. You won't hear the space anymore because that's what digital reverb does. It'll cancel. There's some reverb, yeah. Mm-hmm. No. Well, no, yes, I did. Certain parts, but that was more of a production thing because I wanted it to sound that way. It wasn't really for a mix. So, are you asking if I've ever sidechained in the mix in order to make room for some frequencies so that one can duck out? Here, let's listen to the kick and the bass. And again, if it's, I know it's like super slappy in here, but I'll play it just for a second so you can hear what it's doing. So it ducks out a little bit, but it's more for like an aesthetic, like it's a production thing more than a bass thing. I won't typically do low end side chaining. What? No. So, are you talking about in my production or for a mix? Like, if as a problem-solving tool or as like a stylistic thing? Because those are two different answers. You can ask both. You want both? All right. So, let's talk about the stylistic thing first. That's easy. So I don't even. Well, it depends. Do you know of a plugin called LFO Tool by X4 Records? I use that. I have it in this computer. I think. It's usually, no, I don't. Yeah, I don't use it when I mix. It's usually just in my production. So it's an envelope shaper. It's an automated envelope. The envelope goes down every quarter note or eighth note, or whatever you want. So if your kicks are quarter notes and your envelope ducker is a quarter note, it's going to sound like you put a side chain on a compressor. Does everybody know, or some people know, or curious what I'm talking about with side chain? You want to know more about it? Okay. So that's for production. Sometimes if I want to sound really like 90s, Daft Punk, like, or 90s house, true house music, I will use a compressor and I'll key in the kick drum so that the kick drum, because that's a different behavior. When I want more of a kick bass, every quarter note sounds like it's on an upbeat, right? Then I'll use LFO Tool. More like electro, more EDM, K-pop, that type of stuff, because that's the sound. That, with pop music like that, I like to pander a little bit to the audience because dude, I mean, come on. This day and age, that's the reason why they're listening for certain things. They're going to turn it off if it's not there. So if I'm hired to do a job, I got to make sure that it has to be there. But if I'm doing something, there's a house artist I work with in Brooklyn, that is with a compressor because it's that aesthetic. Now for the mix, what I'll do is that bass management. I take into account the key of the record. So if this key of the record here, look, it's in G, so I cut below F. I don't need it to be there. And then the bass is rather high. See this? Same cut at F. And then this, I think, this may be just the bass was didn't have, because most of the notes are up here. Here, hold on. Let me lower this bass so it doesn't like slap the room around. There you go. Let me kill the kick. And let me get to this bass. See, it's mostly here. There's really no sub. So I needed to just amplify what very little sub I had. I don't like to use synthetic, like bass end, low end. It's usually done through synthesis. Yeah, like Max Bass or Low Ender. I know Plugin Alliance has one. Those will get you into a heap of trouble in mastering. I feel like I never really had too much luck with them. There's a new plugin called Bass XL by a company called Denise. That's actually pretty good. That's a good one. All the other ones I never really had too much luck with. But what I'll do. So the kick drum, right? The kick drum cuts around here. Let me see if I can. I know what to do. We can overlap them. Okay. I got to put the kick on. There it is. You see the red? Look at that. You see how the bass kind of picks up where the kick drum leaves off. Kick drum here, bass up here. So by balancing those types of frequencies, I don't really need to sidechain. You just make room. You do that in production, though. It is a mix. I mean, I guess it's not a mix move. It's a production move. Back in the day, like in the '60s, when it used to be just a producer doing everything, he would be recording or she would be recording you, producing you, mixing you. It was all one brain, right? But the projects were more manageable back then because the max in the '60s you're recording on is a 16 track, right? So these days the tracks are like 8,000. I mean, I did a J-pop record had like 250 tracks, and 100 of them was just vocals. So like, it's hard to there has to be a couple of different people on the project now just because you'll lose sight, not because you're bad, just because there's so many things that you have to keep track of, right? But if I'm the only person on the record, and that's usually the case these days where I'm producing, I'm mixing, I'm recording, I want to get that from the beginning. So I'll think it out. And it's such a nice feeling to write down exactly what you want. So if I really encourage like journaling when honestly, like my mentor told me that. He was like, I have a music journal, like a mixing journal. And it's a blank piece of paper. And when he sits down and does his record, he writes down, bass needs to be this needs to be that. And then all of a sudden, you have a checklist of things you got to do. And it makes it so much easier. And because you wrote it down, you've already explained it to yourself, mentally. So when I was producing this, I knew the key of the record, tuned my kick to that key. I had a bass sound that I liked. I wasn't thinking about like, okay, I have this kick drum and I need a bass that sounds like XYZ. I was just, messing around. And then I got a bass sound that I liked, and I took a listen to the bass, and then I was like, there's not that much sub in this, so I'm going to make sure that my kick has the sub. Because when they're both happening at once, sometimes depending on what the listener gravitates to, you ever listen to a record where the bass sounds like it was really bassy, and then maybe you get stems, and you're like, there's no fucking bass in this. And it's all from the kick. It's designed that way. The Beatles did a lot of that. If you ever listen, you could listen to Beatles stems because they were on Rock Band back in the day. So they're all there. They're all on the internet. Listen to Paul's bass on While My Guitar Gently Weeps. There's no low end. And then you listen to the kick drum and it's like thump, thump, thump. And you're like, oh, shit. And then you realize, oh, wait, the kick drum plays every note with the bass. And it sounds synonymous. That's a production thing. It's not a mixing. They didn't do that. They couldn't do that. The mixing console that they had two knobs, and it was two shelves. There's low shelf and high shelf. There's no fab filter back then. So you do this purposefully, and that's the way you get the song that you want. That's really the quickest way to it. So that's what I do in the mix. So anyway, moving on from that was a good question though, dude. I appreciate that. So we got our kick drum, and then that's right. You tapped me. That's right. Asking that good shit. And then from there, I go to the bass. The next thing I'll do is I'll layer my kick and bass. So I'll get my kick drum sounding right. I'll compress into the kick drum I'll EQ into the compressor. Sorry. I like to use this 2254. I don't know how familiar you guys are with compressor models or whatever. I'm not trying to sound nerdy, but the one that I really, really like in the studio that I use when I used to record drums was a 33609. There's a UAD version of it. There's a million. I mean, every plugin company makes a version of it. So these are very, very fast. It's called a bridge diode compressor. You guys know about tubes, like tube compressors? Tube compressors compress because what a tube does, it's a transistor, right? So a tube just manages voltage. Now, here is a very, very easy definition of how voltage and audio coincide. The more voltage, what do you think happens to the loudness? Right, less voltage. Right, so if you use a transistor, i.e. a tube, that can bias itself. Biasing means, does it allow more voltage or does it allow less voltage? If a tube is biased to allow less voltage, it's going to be quiet. If a tube is biased to allow more voltage, it's going to be louder, right? That's a pretty complex thing that I'm not really going to go any further into. So what a compressor does, it it listens to the signal, and it has a threshold circuit. And if something gets louder, that tube will bias in either direction in order to manage an equal amount of gain. That's the theory, right? It does other things, like in part cool harmonics because it's a tube. Also, not going to get into that, but that's but it's slow. So they invented something called a FET, I don't know, it's field something transistor, but field effect transistor, thank you, sir. And that's really, really fast. So Neve came up with a bridge diode, which is like a valve, but it's fast. And it's poppy, just like a FET, but it still gives you these really nice harmonics. So I like to use that type of compressor on drums. And I'll EQ into it because it's fast. And it'll also, when you EQ into a compressor, you could be heavy-handed, and the compressor will just level things out for you if you set it rhythmically. So I'll do that, then I'll go to the bass. And then from there, I'll start building out my drum track. And then I'll have a rhythm track. So after I do that, let me see what I got. Then maybe I'll work on vocals. But in this case, with this particular record, because the build-up is so important and so emotional, I started there. So we have a piano. Let's play that. That's a filter that was put on in Ableton. So this filter was automated through probably their auto filter, honestly. That's usually a good one. Kind of 90s sounding, like Daft Punk. And then because it's vibey to me, and it's something that I really like, I'm going to stay in that area. I'm going to start mixing around that. And I'm really just jumping around based on what's making me excited about the record. I used to do everything in order. It was like, okay, since I got a kick, the next thing is a snare, and then the next thing is this, and then the next thing is the, I don't know, fucking tea kettle or whatever you're putting in, whatever, a shaker or something. And I'll go down the line, and the song sounds formulaic. But my song started sounding better when I started mixing just where I gravitated to, like that I thought was hot. And I just when I came up with this chord progression, I was like, oh, it's kind of like Jamiroquai. And then I'm like, all right, let's build this part out because it's fun. So I'll show you the order in which I went. This part, and upheld synth, which is a layer. Oh, that's nice, dude. It's kind of reminds me of like Sega Saturn, right? Yeah. There's a vaporwave synth in here. So now this song could be a completely different record, you know. So like if this wasn't in here, I could turn it into something else. If I wasn't, this goes back to the original thing, what I was saying earlier, keeping that original idea, being honest about it. You know, what was your original intention of making the record? Mine was to do like kind of like a 90s throwback. I do like synth wavy sounds and 80s sounds, so I'm going to put them in everything. But they're not going to be the forefront of the record. That's just my, you know, my personality into the song, and that's what makes it hopefully unique. You know, and I let them live. You know, if it works out and it sounds real nice. So after then the string drone. This is a 90s thing. Yeah, I'm sure you guys know the record Vogue by Madonna. This is a complete rip. What are you looking at? You know, sir? You know what I'm talking about. Okay, and then we got, yeah? Nah, man, keep going. You're asking good questions. It's both. Okay, for phase issues, you won't really. Granted, you're not using any weird plugins, and you didn't record things in a weird way if you are recording a synth, or if your wiring is weird. If your wiring is weird, you could be, or your electricity. You know, I'm not going to get into all that crazy shit, but there are things that can impart phase differences. Not all phase differences are bad, though. Do you mic your guitars when you're working on your records? Or is it okay? When you're micing guitars, especially with two microphones. So when I used to mic guitar cabinets, I won't do that anymore because God invented the Kemper. But I used to use a Royer 151, which is a ribbon mic, and an SM57, which is this is a 58. The 57 has a capsule like that, right? It's a standard guitar cabinet miking thing. But I would blend them. It's almost impossible to be perfectly phase coherent. But the phasing is what can make the tone cool. You don't need to hear. No one's going to call the police because you can't hear 500 cycles, 3 decibels down. Dude, phasing is what gives you weird, like, perception. That could be cool. You use everything as a color in your palette. Things don't have to be perfect. That's the only. I mean, I love how computers have made this a little bit more streamlined, but it also gives you the ability to make things perfect, and that sucks because if you are a perfectionist, your job's never done, and if you have OCD, like me and most music people, because that's what we do. That's why we get up in the morning. That's why we were put on this earth, was to make hot jams, dude. I'm going to be working forever. I can't do that. I need to have the record made. So being perfect, throw that to the wind, dude. If there's phasing, make it hot. The only way I would say phasing is bad is if you're nullifying like your program, your signal. Then there's something messed up. But everything has to fit, dude. Analog gear, okay. We're not going to talk about analog versus digital, but I will say that analog gear isn't perfect phase-wise. Stereo preamp or a stereo compressor, that's taking... on this particular mix, I want to flex on you guys. I'm sorry, but there's a Fairchild on the mix, okay? So and that's all I'm going to say about that. But the Fairchild has phase discrepancies on the left and right. Everything. Nothing is perfect in nature. So when you have phase discrepancies on the left and on the right side, but they're not nullifying, they're just different, our brains can perceive it. We can't locate it because our brains don't think that fast, but we feel it, and that's why things in everyone's like, oh, things in analog feel wider. Well, yeah, they feel wider because there's some things that are like have a weird phase rotation on the left and right, so it feels wider. Nothing's gonna be perfect, but that's also why when you listen to a pop record from a computer, it's fucking tight and punchy, and both fucking I'm cursing a lot. I'm making trouble for that. Both speakers fire off like exactly the same time. You're like, oh man, yeah, you know, and that's where most pop producers like will debate. It's a trade-off. Do you want fast and punchy? Do you want warm and wide? You want a combination of both. Sometimes, well, in fact, this song was mixed analog, but then when I did the mix for Mag, because everything's in the box here, this is what I use for whenever I give lectures. This mix sounded better, and I was like, yeah, damn, Fairchild. You know what I'm saying? You know, like sometimes there's no rules. You know, the only rule is that you're not doing what you intended. You know, you always got to do what you're intended. You're asking good questions, though, by the way. So anyway, what I would do is, this is another production thing. The reason why you know it's a production thing is there's no plugins here because I got the sound. So I'm not going to mess with it. Right? That was another thing that I had to, like, unlearn. You know, once I'm in mix mode, okay, then I pretend I'm, you know, Crystal Algae and fucking, or whatever the other guy's name is, Michael Brower, who, like, compresses everything. He's awesome, though, but still. Anyway, you know, like, having restraint is hard when you can do anything in a computer, but when you only have one compressor that's physical and you got to do something else, you got to be creative, you know. So limit yourself. So what I would do here, I just got the sound. So I heard this, Madonna. I heard this and I was like, this is a lot of mid-range, and it's not smooth. It's kind of bubbly, right? And I wanted to add a little bit of smoothness to it because I'm not trying to make like an electronic record because I got remember the pianos here. That's the main sound. So this gives it a little air. Watch it. Let's bring it back. I'm going to drop the mic for a second and then just unmute these together, and you'll hear what I'm talking about. See how it got like anemic? If I mute the piano, this song has a totally different personality. That personality does not present itself in the record on a full mix. I'm just using characteristics, but that personality is what inspired me to put it in there anyway. Did anybody just follow what I just said? That's the trick, dude. And it's not even like a trick. And I'm not saying I didn't come up with this. I didn't invent it. I'm really not a genius with this shit. The thing that I'm really good at is just being like having a good time making records. That's it, dude. I have fun. Because you got to have fun. Like, if you're not having fun, I don't know, dude. Are you having fun, sir? He gave me, he did know Field Express. Field Express. Welcome to Field Express. That is a gas station mini mart. Okay, so after I got this part done, then, so the vocals were a pretty crazy thing. I had to like really rearrange all these vocals, so we're not gonna go into that, but simplified this. Here's some vocal EQ, just because in the original record, now not to say that I didn't like the EQ in the original record, it's just that the original record is a completely different genre, so it had much more low end in the vocal than I needed in a house record that has a lot of bass. Now I'm going to ask y'all, because you guys are rock star producers, if I have a house record, right, which is typically driven by bass, what's more important to you, the producer, and to your audience that knows the semiotics of this? You ever know what the word semiotics means? Semiotics is just a fancy word. This is such a special day because you're learning a new vocabulary word and you can pass your SATs, everybody, yay. Semiotics is anything that has to do with anything. So a stop sign, semiotic red, white lettering, semiotics, you know? Richie Beretta, semiotics, very funny, humor. So, see, somebody gets it. I got one laugh. One laugh, dude. That was nice. Oh, it was Eddie. Okay. That doesn't change my friend. So then really, I get 0 laughs. So, so the vocal, that low end in the vocal, that deepness in Beyonce's vocal, I don't need it because this is meant for the club. And I need to hear the kick drum and the bass. And I need to have that 4 on the floor driver. This isn't like, a showcase of her talents. In terms of the richness of her vocal, because no one's going to be paying attention to it. Now, I could go ahead and try and do both, but I risk losing the audience. And I also risk losing the whole point that I was inspired to make this fucking joint. You see what I'm saying? It's all about staying true to what, and it's easy. It becomes easier. A lot of like YouTube garbage where it's like, here's all the things you can do here, and I got to do this, and all the everybody does something different. I'm not saying that stuff is right or wrong. All I'm saying is that as you get better, you're going to be coming up with things of your own, and you should be, because you're just trying to get a means to an end. You hear something in your head, you want to get it out. How do I get it out? Now, the way you get it out quick is by practicing. Does anybody practice producing? You do? No. It don't, dude. I thought so too. Until my mentor asked me this question. He was like, "You practice?" And I was like, "What do you mean practice?" He's like, "You practice mixing." And I'm like, "I mix records every day." And he's like, "Doesn't count." And he was like, "Kobe takes fucking 1,400 free throws, not in the game, so that when he's in the game, he doesn't think. You're taking free throws in the game. You call it practice?" And I was like, "Oh shit, I'm fucking up." So you got to do it on the off season. So what I do is I have sessions. Like I didn't get to do it yet, but every year, January 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, I try to, because I'm obsessed with reverbs. I got 10 minutes left now, for real. I'm obsessed with reverbs, so I'll open up random random thing, pianos, vocals, or whatever, and I'll just put reverbs on stuff. I'll just mess with chains, and then I'll label them: sad reverb, happy reverb, tough reverb, rockstar reverb, moody reverb. Anything that where it's like the reverb, like the sound triggers an emotion. And then I get a song that's about being, getting broken up with. I'm going to use one of those reverbs that drew out that emotion. And that's how I work with reverbs. And my mentor, he's like, nah, I need to know what's on the wall. I'll think I'm in a wooden room with a carpet floor. I can't think that way. I don't connect those dots. It's not because I don't understand his approach. I understand his approach, but that's not going to get my records hot. You talk your own language. You identify with certain semiotics of every genre that you work in. Use it to your advantage. Don't learn on the job. There you go. So that's not practice. You're learning on the job. Now, it's okay to learn on the job. Everybody does. But you should also reinforce what you learn, because I used to do this shit all the time. I come up with an awesome patch, or I make a good sample. I have samples that I'm like, oh, I'm going to go back and pull this kick and then use it in another session. And I never do it because I'm not paying attention to that. I'm not practicing. I should, you got to go back and see what you did and analyze. Not that I don't even really follow sports, but like football players, they'll look at last night's game and be like, I fucked up there. That was pretty good. I messed up there, whatever, and they'll learn from it. You got to do that. That's how you get better quick. It's not making music isn't difficult if you have a natural inclination, but that natural inclination can only get you so far before you have to start sharpening that knife, otherwise you plateau. So let's see, we're going to jump around. I got 10 minutes. You know what? Let's use the last 8 minutes for open questions and stuff, because this seems to be more of a Q&A thing, which is cool. I'm always hype about that. Anybody else have any more questions? Yo. Oh man, good question. I tune the kick drum when I'm producing the record, and I the reason why is because low end dissonance sounds like garbage. It's so. How much about music theory do you know? Okay, do you know when notes clash, right? You know when someone's singing out of key, right? You could pick that out because it happens in a frequency range you're sensitive to. It's vocal range. So if somebody or an instrument that's in our vocal range, somewhere between 7 600 hertz and 33, right? Those are where we're pretty sensitive. If there's something that is dissonant to our ears, it's easy to find that and say, close my eyes, that person or thing that is not in harmony is there, right? We could focus. It's called, it's a phantom image it gives us. Low end doesn't do that, but it still throws our brain in haywire, right? So when you have a kick drum that is tuned to just maybe it's a sample, and you tune it up 24 semitones, so it's 2 octaves up, you'll hear a note, a clear note, because it's in a range that we can identify. That's a note, right? That note is dissonant to the song. You're basically adding a wrong note into your record every time that kick drum hits. You may not be able to pick it out in terms of a perception, but what it'll do is it's going to cloud whatever's around it in the low end, so your bass may not articulate the way you want it to. And you may pull out an EQ and be like, all right, well, I guess I got to EQ the bass louder because maybe I don't hear it. You're only not hearing it because when something's dissonant, you're going to just be directed to whatever your brain likes to listen to in that particular frequency. It's very individualistic. So it's, I think, imperative to tune drums, electronic or acoustic. That's the first thing I'm going to do. What's the key? What's the tonic of the song? Meaning not the key or the root. The tonic is like what's that song in, and then I tune the drums to that tonic. So I'm usually either tuning a first or a second, something that's in the scale, so that it doesn't create any kind of low end weird dissonance. Very good question. Yeah. Yeah, it's all relative, I would say. But can you elaborate before I answer? Okay, that's what I thought. Okay, that's what I thought you were alluding to. Yes. So a kit will, for me, and this is just me. This is I don't know how. Well, I know how some other people do it, but I don't know. I know how I do it makes sense to me. And when I was a kid, I started off on drums, and I just sort of do it to way I remember drums when I first hit drums. The first thing I thought of was low, snares high, tom 1 is sort of high, tom 2 is somewhere between my kick and my tom 1, and I EQ that way. So every drum cuts off at a different. That's the way instruments are designed, like an orchestra mixed itself, because certain instruments could only have a finite amount of reproducible frequencies. So and that's how composers composed. They're like, well, I have to have my flutes play this because the other instruments don't play in that range. So and drums are very orchestral. So that's how I'll mix my drums. Now, obviously, because they are, the low tom will share certain frequencies of. I don't just jigsaw puzzle it, but I do make sure that they're tuned in a way where if they're played together, I can know that there's two things being played together. My favorite thing is having a kick drum and a low tom play at the same time. And the thing that pisses me off the most is when I can't tell the difference. So the way you tell the difference is by tuning them to two different notes. Yeah. Okay. Yes. Oh man, good question. Okay, this will be. You can. I know you got one more. Just see me after the thing. I got you because you've been red. Here, I want to show you something. So this is what just in case someone had this question. Here is this is signal flow at a very 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 simple thing, right? Parallel signal flow. Does anyone know about parallel processing? Okay, parallel processing is this. You have a guitar, that signal gets split. One goes straight to your mix bus. One goes to a bunch of effects, and then they get summed at your mix bus. So you are in control of the volume of the guitars unprocessed. Now, the guitars may be processed one way and the parallel audio is processed another way, and you just blend, right? Your question has to do with the mix bus. In my particular mixing rig, I rely heavily on parallel compression, but I do mix into a compressor. That compressor, I'll show you. Yes, the master, what would be considered your master, right? So this I call the 2 mix because of stereo, left and right. Here is the mix bus in this. This thing is a vintage warmer. It just adds saturation that I feel is kind of close to what I have in my analog rig, right? It's not really doing too much. Here's the compressor. This compressor is going to get, both in my analog rig and here, somewhere around 3 decibels max. I want just the needle to dance, right? The way I set that is I have a balance, and I want to get the song to sound like a song just with faders, just by balancing. Yep, without this on. And you do this. This is like practice session, right? You do a couple of them. Just no EQ, no nothing. Just balance. This song sounds like a song. Put a compressor on it, and then you're gonna dip the threshold. I like to use medium and medium basically throughout. I used to like overthink compression and just okay, this type of like a bass guitar is fast, so I use slow attack, fast release because I want to preserve blah 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 blah. Medium, because I don't want the compressor to mix for me. I just want it to catch what I'm missing. So medium attack, medium release, and I'll lower this threshold here until the song feels like it gets just dense enough where I'm like, that sounds finished. And then I could hear, the benefit of doing it this way is I can also hear the frequencies that are triggering the compressor. The frequencies that you would normally reduce, like let's say in a kick drum, if something is way too subby and the drum is playing too fast. If you compress this way, just to test it out, you will hear that sub, and it'll be easily identifiable to be like, I gotta kill that sub because the song's not behaving. It's making my compressor act weird. On medium and medium, it's very easy to tell like something's happening that shouldn't be happening because the compressor isn't really adding too much attitude. It's not fast. It's not behaving fastly. But just by nature, compression is fast. I mean, it happens in a matter of milliseconds. It's faster than we can hear. So what I would suggest is do that a couple times just with a compressor until you get the song behaving and feeling dense. Like, you know what I'm talking about, right? You have a mix, put a mix up with no processing on it, and then listen to something on Spotify, and you're like, this sounds like a record. It's just cohesive. Get that sort of thing from your compressor, and then save it as a preset. Do it again for another record. Save it as a preset. Do it again for another, and then look at each preset and be like, you know what? It's sort of in the same place. I know what I like, and then that's your mix bus. That's your setting. And then you mix into it. And then you'll hear when I get too loud, things start behaving differently. Sometimes that's how I know I put my vocal too loud, because I have a habit of putting vocals too loud. And I'll be like, this sounds right, because vocals are really loud these days. And then I'll look at my compressor and the needle's going nuts. And I'm like, I knew it was too loud. It's a good visual aid in that respect. Very good question. Okay, I got to wrap it up. Thank you very, very much for being yourselves. If you have any questions afterwards, you can hit me up while I'm here cleaning up. Also, I don't know if you guys are doing anything 2:30 a.m. tomorrow, but I sort of run a cult called the Church of Olive Garden. That's happening tomorrow. I'm serious too. Like, there's breadsticks. I mean, yeah. No, he's still. We're still cool. We're still cool. Yeah, no. We're still cool. We're still cool. I still got Flavor Town right here, dude. Yeah, dude. That's my. I wanted to go into the Sussy Gussie and Sussy Baka, but next year. I appreciate y'all. Thank you so much.